Shalom, and this is Jerusalem studio on TV7 Israel News. I am Amir Oren, sitting in for the traveling Jonathan Hessen. And our topic today is the day after in the northern front of Israel. And this is, of course, a cliche. Maybe it started when someone had a hangover after a night of partying. But in the Israeli case, it's obviously a matter for concern. And while everyone talks about the day after in Gaza, the question is still nagging regarding what is happening in the north, what are the problems and the prospects, and what could happen, what should Israel do regarding the day after in Lebanon vis-a-vis Hezbollah. With us today are Brigadier General in the reserves, the Israel Air Forces, Yaron Rosen, formerly a senior officer on the air staff, and also the chief of the IDF cyber staff.
Good to be here.
And Reserve Colonel Sarit Zehavi, the founding director of the research center Alma, which is based in the Galilee region, of whom you are also a resident. So first of all, what's it like now in the north?
It's been stable in the past few months, meaning that we have every day few attacks coming from Hezbollah, an average of 50 and maybe even 60 attacks every week with various munitions. We see more use of rockets in the past few months, in the past 2 months. Less use of anti-tanks, but yet not enough to say that that it has stopped or anything like that. And more use of UAVs as well in the past few weeks.
Is there a sort of tacit understanding or signaling between the parties to hit mostly military targets or even civilian targets where military personnel have been seen around, or terrorist personnel like Hezbollah, or is it a free-for-all?
On the Israeli side, of course, we don't target any civilian target, only military targets. And yet Hezbollah is hiding inside the towns and villages of South Lebanon. So in many cases, when you see a video that IDF published about an attack in South Lebanon, and you see something that looks like a house that explodes, it's actually a headquarters of Hezbollah or something of the sort. As for the Israeli side, we see that the majority of the attacks of Hezbollah are either directly to civilian targets or putting at risk civilian targets. Like, again, if they are using rockets and their statement is that these rockets were meant to hit an army base, an IDF base, but rockets are not an accurate weapon, it is clear that these rockets are endangering civilians everywhere here in the region. And this is happening all the time. We have hits in the homes and inside the communities here in the north every day.
General Rosen, regarding Sarit's last point, some of the Israeli headquarters, not garrisons, not bases, but headquarters, are indeed situated in civilian surroundings, such as the headquarters of the Northern Command, which occupies what used to be a resort area, but nevertheless is in a civilian neighborhood. Maybe the IDF should have relocated all of these facilities away from towns and cities.
I think, Amir, there's a huge difference between how you frame how Hezbollah embeds military capabilities, just like Hamas, by the way, inside civilian infrastructure, and the IDF, which is adjacent to civilian population because Israel is not such a big country, and normally you would have something close to a city or a town or a village. So I think the comparison is actually not very good to say that, you know, if the IDF needs to evacuate now bases, I think it's beyond the point. I think the main point is, which just to add to the previous points you discussed, is that on both sides, after 6 months or so, we have a de facto zone in which civilian life writ large, cannot actually exist. So the economic impact of this ongoing war between a proxy of Iran and Israel is very, very has very high implications on how civilians live. In Israel, this is a huge issue. This is the north. This is the most beautiful time of year when most Israelis will, in the next month or so, will go and vacate in the north. And in the south of Lebanon, needless to say, there's not much tourism, but it's the main Shiite strip of, and the base for Hezbollah, the base, the population that supports Hezbollah. And I think in that sense, both sides are paying a price.
The means and methods employed by Israel, because the way the conflict started, are different in the south and in the north. In the south, obviously, it's a ground maneuver in addition to the air and artillery support. And in the north, it's only standoff. And one dimension of this fight in the north is that while Hezbollah does not have an air force, it does have some aviation assets. And it seems as if there is quite a tit for tat between the Israel Air Force and Hezbollah's aviation. Some of its assets were hit as far away as the Bekaa Valley, Baalbek, while Hezbollah tried to hit the Israeli air control station on Meron Mountain, which is line of sight from Lebanon. How do you gauge the results of this fight so far? IAF against Hezbollah aviation.
It's an interesting question. I think that what we're seeing here is sort of an evolution of asymmetrical air warfare. So if on the ground you see terrorists that attack, like we're seeing in Gaza, behind from the tunnels, they keep attacking the forces wherever they are not very, whenever there's no movement. In air warfare, you would see different swarms of, whether it's UAVs or other means of directing munitions. I think in that sense, what they have successfully done is they have scaled these asymmetrical air warfare assets that they have. Again, this is Iran. They have very smartly positioned them and are aiming them in a continuous way that is keeping the Israeli Air Force from on its toes, if you will, defending the border in the air. So this will continue to be a challenge for the Israeli Air Force, from finding these very small targets all the way to shooting them down once sometimes before they cross or after they cross. Not only missiles, but also these drones and cruise missiles and UAVs that are deliberately trying to go in the cracks of a regular Air Force. I think this, all of this trend will be learned for a long, long time after this war will end.
Colonel Zehavi, the Hezbollah leadership, Hassan Nasrallah, and his associates have indicated that they do not want to escalate further, and that their aim in firing at Israel, at launching rockets and anti-tank missiles and the rest, is to pin down the Israeli military so that it cannot allocate all of its forces to the fight against Hamas. And therefore, they are supporting Hamas by diverting part or maybe half of Israel's resources to their own sectors. The downside from their point of view of that is that the Israeli Defense Forces are now much more prepared, having been there, having reconnoitered the terrain, having practiced their war plans, and should full-scale war erupt, they would be in a better position to win. But on the other side of the hill, does the Israeli effort really degrade the Hezbollah fighting power? We had some 300 plus operatives, mostly Hamas, but some Jama'ah Islamiyah, some Hamas, and others, and some Iraqi-based militias, that they were killed. And some senior leaders, the last one being, don't be offended, please, but equivalent to your own rank of colonel in the Hezbollah organization, one of the important leaders of the Radwan force, their commandos. Should war start, will Hezbollah find that its power now is significantly less than what it was on October the 8th when it joined the fight?
Well, a few things. First, IDF published that it had bombed more than 4,000 targets in Lebanon since this war started. About 10% of these are from Radwan brigades, the commando units of Hezbollah. This is a very impressive number, and yet the feeling is that most of these targets are positioned in the area which is 0 to 5 kilometers from the Israeli border. And very few are to further areas, either in South Lebanon or further in Baalbek, as you mentioned. Clearly, we have seen during the war, and we will see once there is a ceasefire, a very quick recovery process. The shipments from Iran through Syria and Iraq are ongoing, and we can learn about that only by following the attacks that are trying to prevent these shipments from arriving to the hands of Hezbollah. And you see that there are much more attacks than comparing to previous eras. And that's why I think that eventually the capability of Hezbollah to threaten Israel with missiles and rockets was not, in general, was not damaged. The only thing that was truly damaged is the capability of Hezbollah to stand right on the fence, right on the border. And yet, if you're familiar a little bit with the terrain, you understand that it doesn't matter that much, because eventually they withdrew into the homes and into the villages, which also have a sight into the Israeli side of the border, and they are launching from there their anti-tank missiles. And these are being launched, as I've said, every day. So the bottom line is that a lot have been done. I believe that this is what the Israel IDF is trying to do now, is to create some kind of a military achievement before there is a ceasefire. But what was done is not enough. As for the targeted killings, we can talk about 18 Iranian senior officers that were killed in Syria, and 13 Hezbollah senior commanders that were killed in Lebanon. This is truly, again, an impressive number, especially the last targeted killing in Damascus, which put us all now in Israel in some kind of hold and anticipation to what the next few days would look like, because the Iranians threatened that they will retaliate, and that they will retaliate directly. And there is a huge question here: what does that mean, and where we are going?
John Rosen, we speak about this fight as if there is a mythical country called Hezbollah, but it's Lebanon. It's the state of Lebanon, which allows Hezbollah, the strongest force within it, with no responsibility, no accountability. It does what it wants, and the government in Beirut is helpless to change it. And Israel cannot really operate freely against the Lebanese army when it enables Hezbollah to move and position itself. How does the IDF and especially the IAF plan around such an obstacle?
Lebanon is a very challenging country, neighbor country for Israel, because it's a virtually it's a failed state, and there are various powers that operate inside Lebanon. On the military side, it's very, very Iran oriented. So the Lebanese army is virtually not responsible for whenever Hezbollah wants to operate, where it wants to operate, however the Iranians direct it. So on that side, on the military side, it's totally a huge problem for Israel. On the economic side, it's a failed state. The economy is virtually broken to pieces. And I think the help of whether it's France or the West, the US namely, it's not doing a very good job in helping Lebanon stand on its feet in the last 5 years. So altogether, if you look at what constitutes a nation, right? The economic power, the military. So we're seeing that basically Lebanon is just a holding ground for whatever the powers that are outside the regional powers want to conduct through Iran. Iran is just a corridor for power projection for the Iranians. Therefore, the Air Force and the IDF need to claim the skies of Lebanon in order to gather intelligence on Hezbollah and Iranian movements. That's one side of it. The second thing is preparation for any operation that Israel might need or will need to conduct in Lebanon in the future. For that, you still have to control the skies, and for that, you need to be able to fly safely with the surface-to-air missile threat that is present in Lebanon, and you have to attack. That's the third part. When you need, in Lebanon or in Syria, whether it's Hezbollah forces or Iranian forces. So that is what the IDF and the Israeli Air Force need to do. I think that in the future, again, it needs to be a blend of diplomatic, informational, economic, and military dimension, like a comprehensive strategy that needs to be played out in conjunction with what is going in Gaza. Once Gaza scales down and moves from war efforts to stabilization efforts, I think at the same time, Israel needs to leverage as much as it can the situation in the north in order to recalibrate what it allows Hezbollah, where it allows Hezbollah to be after this war starts de-escalating, after we somehow manage to de-escalate this round. And we need to completely change the way that Iran operates. And I think that the last operation that we've seen in Damascus, as mentioned, was a very good show of force, showing that it is not, Iran will not be able to continue operating from Syria against Israel, whatever the cost is. And a poker game, you would call it a raise. This is I'm an advocate of this raise I've been an advocate of this raise for quite a while, wondering for a long time why Israel is playing this tit for tat. And I think this will continue to be needed. But the thing is, the demands need to be very, very clear on the informational and communication side. Israel needs to demand from the other side. Otherwise, it won't be able to continue to leverage its physical operations in Lebanon and Syria.
Going back to the earlier point Yaron raised, if the government in Beirut is helpless to move Hezbollah, is there any sense in hitting in Israel, striking infrastructure targets? Because contrary to what the Jerusalem leadership believed in the 1990s or perhaps in 2006, it would be pointless to do it if all it would do is make the civilian leaders of Lebanon cry to the UN, US, and others for help.
I agree. I think that the key to win this campaign with Hezbollah is to work with the international community, trying to get a legitimacy to a future attack if needed, because for now, it seems like a dead end. We all understand the price of war, which is not a walk in the park as well. And we understand that the capabilities of Hezbollah will cause a lot of damage to the Israeli side. We understand that the fact that Hezbollah's rockets are hidden inside the towns of Lebanon will also cause a lot of damage to Lebanon. On the other hand, an agreement, as you said, it's going to be kind of a fiction. And we know that over here, by the way, up north, we are very much worried about that eventually kind of a diplomatic agreement, arrangement will be signed or will be agreed with the great powers and Lebanese and Israelis under the wing of the United Nations Security Council. But it is going to be a fiction because like in the past, nobody speaks about what's the deadline. Nobody speaks about disarming the Hezbollah, just a pushback. They live in South Lebanon. Pushback means nothing. And nobody speaks about what kind of effective enforcement mechanism we are going to have, because the previous ones, which are the Lebanese army or UNIFIL, were completely ineffective. So I think that the only way to get out of this dead end is to work with the international community. And of course, targeting infrastructures of Lebanon, it's not the answer. And I'm not even sure that anybody is considering that, only if it's along the lines of directly supporting the military effort of Hezbollah against Israel. I think that the main targets that should be chosen among the targets of Hezbollah are strategic targets, are the threat that Hezbollah posed to Israelis. This is what we should focus on.
You surely recall, and you wrote about it, researched it, in the summer and fall of 2022, the maritime demarcation deal was negotiated. Some critics in Israel came out against it for various reasons, but it seems to be holding even during this war. Hezbollah, of course, has enough assets, drones and the like, if it wants to hit the Israeli gas facilities, and Israel can do it vice versa, even though, of course, it's international companies rather than state-owned. Or you're shaking your head, you don't agree?
No, I just think that we should limit our expectations from this gas deal. This gas deal was made to take the gas out of the sea, and in this respect, it succeeded. I agree with the criticizers that it sent the wrong message to Hezbollah, but in any case, it has no meaning with regard to what is happening now, because Hezbollah gained an achievement, which is the evacuation of 60,000 Israelis from the borderline. And we don't know exactly how we are going to bring them back. So I think that from the point of view of Hezbollah, there is no true reason to escalate the situation at this time, while Israel is, trying to figure out how to bring back the evacuees. I don't think the gas deal has anything to do with that, except for the bad message that we sent back then to Hezbollah. And by the way, that we had opportunities to fix this bad message. For example, with the issue of the tents that Hezbollah planted south to the blue line, while we, instead of just taking off these tents, we appealed to the UN, and then, everything got mixed up. So I don't think this is relevant to the current conflict now.
General Rosen, military leaders and sometimes civilian defense leaders in Israel always go on and on about their promise to provide the population both security in substance and the sense of security. Now it seems that perhaps for the first time, the two are really inseparable. And because we only have some 20 seconds, could you please reassure us that the IDF can bring back both security and a sense of security to the northern border?
A huge challenge. I'm sad that I cannot be, so strong with how I say this, but this is a huge challenge for Israel, for the government, and for the IDF. When I speak about a comprehensive strategy, it means that it is not only by military means. A strategy needs to be put in place. And going back to what you just mentioned in your discussion, I think that indirectly, until now, dealing with Iran indirectly has not helped us. We are exactly at the point that you just described for that reason exactly. So I think that the direct confrontation with Iran in the region needs to be part of the future strategy. And instead of going directly with the proxy, which is Hezbollah, we need to continue our efforts with Hezbollah, but at the same time confront directly with Iranians in Syria and all of what Iran is building to send the message that the price on Iran is rising. We need to raise that price. That is the only way for the proxy to stop what it's doing. Any other way will not work and will not bring back security and stability to the north of Israel and Israel writ large.
Thank you both, Colonel Sarit Zehavi with Alma, the research center in the Galilee, General Yaron Rosen of the Air Force in Tel Aviv. And we will be back with another edition very soon. For the time being, shalom from Jerusalem.